Welcome to Navigating the Aftermath, the podcast where we explore the journey of rebuilding and rediscovery after life storms. Join us as we delve into stories of resilience, triumph, and transformation, offering insights and inspiration to guide you through your own path of healing and growth. Hello and welcome. Today is another episode of Navigating the Aftermath. Today we're talking about switching faith, switching religion, and I have two wonderful ladies with me. If you guys please go ahead and introduce yourselves.
I am Dallas Horn.
And I am Lindsay Blacker with the Bright Beam Collective. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here with me and being open about discussing such a sensitive topic. So I first want to ask you, what motivated your decision to switch religions, and what was the journey like leading up to this moment?
Yeah, I think it's different for each of us in a lot of ways, but also similar in some ways. Personally, for me, I grew up very devout in a very devout family and was doing all the quote unquote checklist items growing up. And then there was to be brief, there was a certain point of time in my adulthood. It was like right before COVID hit, which is kind of interesting timing. We can maybe get into that later. But in my adulthood, I just started realizing that my values and the church's values were growing farther and farther apart. And as I was becoming myself and just as we go through our 20s, you kind of figure out who you are, right? And as I was doing that, I just figured out that who I was and my beliefs and my values are not in line with the religion anymore. And so I exited. So that's kind of to be brief, and we'll get more into it, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's for me. What about you?
Yeah, for me, so something in the LDS faith is that you cannot be attracted to the same sex. And I knew probably when I was 16, 17 that I was attracted to the same sex. And so I felt so much shame within myself. And I just kept that secret from everybody. But I thought to myself, this has to be true. If I'm going to give my entire life to this, I have to research the history of this church and just research all of it and make sure that this is true, because I'm basically just giving my entire life over to this organization. And I will have to keep this secret within myself, and it's very uncomfortable. So when I kind of came to terms with that and said, yes, I am gay, then I just researched and went down the rabbit hole of finding out more and more about this religion that I had been brought up in, and found out a lot of things that we just weren't told as members. And so for me, it was that, just finding out that the history, it wasn't what I thought it was. It wasn't true, and it was made up. And so that's when I was just okay, well, thank God for me, because now I don't have to keep this secret in. I can live my life fully. So I often tell people, I'm thankful for my sexuality because it made me do the research.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And yes, being religious, it's a commitment, and choosing it wisely, right? And I want to touch on another layer of that both of you guys are in Utah. And would you be able to, would you be open to giving more insight, what Mormon religion is? Because I heard a lot of things, and I'm sure the listeners as well, but what's it like inside? And especially with you mentioning that being attracted to the same sex is, and as we know, in religion, it's prohibited. So how was it for you, and how do you see the Mormon culture and religion in general?
Yeah, so just a brief background on, technically they're the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints now. A lot of people know them as Mormons because they believe in the Book of Mormon. So basically it's a religion that was founded in the 1840s. by a man named Joseph Smith. And he, essentially discovers these gold plates. He translates them. That becomes the Book of Mormon. And then he writes his own, like modern day scripture, which is called the Doctrine and Covenants. So members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints believe in the Bible, the Book of Mormon, Pearl of Great Price, which is like a better translated or like a different translated version of like Genesis and Exodus, and then Doctrine and Covenants, which is modern day revelation from Joseph Smith. As it looked like, that's kind of how it's came to be. But as it is now, probably most people are familiar with like the word of wisdom. So a lot of Latter-day Saints or a lot of Mormons don't drink coffee, alcohol. They don't use like drugs as in like marijuana or any illegal drugs. Some really devout members weren't allowed to drink caffeine or aren't allowed to drink caffeine, which was my upbringing, which is really interesting. But they're very big on families, centered around families, and we're here to have families, to multiply and replenish the earth and return back to God. And then essentially we can become gods in the afterlife, and then do the same thing with our own posterity. Is I'd say kind of their main teachings and main beliefs. What would you add?
Yeah, and I would just add to that. So we were told like this is the one true church, and that Christians, they had the Bible, but then we were so lucky because this guy, Joseph Smith, he had the Book of Mormon, the golden plates. And so it was finally like it was the missing puzzle piece to the truth. And so we were taught like we're so blessed to have this book, and we would study that book. And Dallas even served a mission preaching about that book. That's like the center of our religion.
Yeah, and oftentimes how I would explain it on my mission was like if you have one single dot, the Bible, then you can draw a lot of lines through that, right? And there's a lot of interpretations that you can have from that when there's just one single dot. But now with the second dot being the Book of Mormon, you can only draw a straight line through both of those, which then gives the whole truth, and like the right translation of scriptural doctrine. So that's kind of like that, how that puzzle piece fits in a little bit.
Yeah, and Dallas touched on the word of wisdom and things like that. So we have these commandments from God of all the things that we can and can't do. And I think Mormons are kind of known for their word of wisdom, like not to drink coffee, not to use any substance, to wear the special underwear that keeps us protected from the outside world. There's a lot of things that we can probably get into, but there are just
no sex before marriage.
Yeah, which I think,
so
yeah.
A lot of Mormons get married. Like in Utah, everyone's married at 18 and has 3 kids by 20, so
Yeah.
that center of family gets people to get married young.
Yeah.
We also have in Utah, fun fact, like a very high divorce rate, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's all fascinating. I really want to touch on all of what you guys shared. So I'm curious, like what rituals and practices that you miss in your new faith and your new religion, and what like you're really happy to leave behind?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think like, so I've been gone from the religion for 3, like I think officially like 4 years possibly, because it was around COVID when I left. But so originally I probably wouldn't say I missed anything. But now that I'm like kind of removed from it and not as like angry, I miss like there is a sense of community there, and like all around the world. So if you go on vacation, you can go to Sunday services and go to sacrament meeting, and then you have like a community there, and everyone's really friendly. And when you're in the club, when you're in the group with them, you do have like a community all over the world, and you can just kind of pick up and leave and move, and you don't have to stress as much because you can just find other members. And then that's like a built-in like community and friendship. So I miss that, just because like it was a lot of fun. We played a lot of sports and I love sports. So I do miss that aspect. Do you miss any aspects?
Yeah, I miss the community. And with that, the community, it brought, they gave us so many, they gave us structure, you know, just like any community would. So like, we had our friends and our family, but then we also did service with each other. We sang together. We did campouts together. So it really was like this tight-knit family that we had. And so once you take that away from a person, like it really does leave you just with, okay, yeah, what do I do? Because everything I've known is now gone. And when you first leave, like you don't know about all the other communities and all the other groups and life outside of the church. Thank goodness, you know, that we were able to like open our eyes and see that. But I think community is the biggest part. It's just having that sense of belonging somewhere is what I missed. But now that we have, like, for I'll speak for me, now that I have kind of come into who I am, I found other communities where I fit in and where I belong, actually, you know, and we can sing, we can serve, we can do all these things. We don't need that religion to take ownership of it. And yeah.
But that's like what's interesting, I think, about like why people stay, because we hear being in Utah and associating with members a lot, we hear a lot of people like disagreeing with the teachings, disagreeing with like a lot that goes on in the church, but they still stay. They're still like very active. And I think like just like Lindsay said, she is very outgoing and she is so good at making friends and like making her own community. So she said she found it, but I think she went out and made it because she's really good at that. But like for someone like me, that's a little bit harder because yes, I'm outgoing and yes, I'm like extroverted to an extent. But I like don't have the easiest time making new friends. And so that's where like the church was really beneficial for me when I was in it, because it just was this built-in like community that I didn't have to like facilitate and grow these friendships and relationships, because we could go to the same events and they would just naturally grow. I wouldn't have to like, put in a ton of effort for that. So I think that there's kind of two sides to that. And I think
That's
that's a
true.
lot of
Yeah.
reason why some people stay, even though they disagree, is just because that community, it is easier, for sure, especially being in Utah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like listening to you guys, I envisioned this like bubble being like burst. Like you actually like put this like spear through this and like bursted the bubble. And I'm curious, how did you find that courage? Like what was kind of like the last straw that broke the camel's back, and like why you decided to burst the bubble?
Yeah, for me, it was a long time coming. It was years of like just finding out little pieces of the history, like I had mentioned, and just being so uncomfortable with this, like, this back and forth of, am I gonna stay in because of this community? And like, I don't want to upset my family. I don't want to rock the boat, you know, it's easier to just pretend. Um, but then when it just became like, when I learned everything I did about the organization we were in, I just felt so icky about being in it, you know, just because there's a lot of harmful teachings within that organization. And so for me, like it was either going to be me, like, you know, exploding and just having a mental breakdown, or just accepting it and being like, okay, all right, you guys, this is me, and I'm out. So it just felt so uncomfortable to stay in.
Yeah. For me, it also was a really long time. I think for a lot of people it is. Um, you know, either a couple years or quite a few years in the making. But So for me, like we said earlier, I did serve a mission, and that's for women, it's a year and a half in just a different area. So it could be anywhere around the world. I happened to be in Baltimore, which I loved, and I loved my mission. But I came back from my mission, and that first, like the next day, so you pray every morning, you pray every night on your mission, you pray before you eat, you pray before a lesson, you pray after a lesson, you pray before you leave your house, you pray, like you're always praying, right? And so it should be this thing that I was really comfortable with. And I was like, comfortable with praying on my mission, and like everything was fine. But when I came back, I just remember like kneeling down, um, and like just saying a prayer, and I was just like, this just feels weird. Like, I don't know, like it just felt weird. And so I didn't like do it again. So that was like the last time I'd ever like prayed, was the day I got back from my mission. And then I think from there, yeah, just like little things would, um, lead up to it. Like I said earlier, I just discovered that like we were kind of going like this. There wasn't anything that really like happened where I was like, okay, I can't be in this religion anymore. It more was just like, okay, we'd be here, I'd check back in, and I'd be like, oh yeah, we are not on the same page, and just kept getting further and further. The straw that broke the camel's back for me though is, I have known that I am gay for a long time, but I like haven't consciously like thought about it or haven't like accepted it until 2019. And that was kind of like a pivotal moment for me. And I remember just like trying to figure out, okay, because I knew like if I go down this route and I like experiment with women, I I know I'm not going to be in the church. Like I knew that it was going to be the real thing if I were to experiment with women. And so I had to, figure that out and decide if I was going to or not, and ended up, having this fling with a coworker. Um, and yeah, just kind of from then it was just like, I can't, like, I don't really believe in anything that they share. Like I think very differently than everyone else there. And I'm gay, and I want to like, pursue that. I originally had said that that was a secret that I was going to take to the grave. And yeah, I kind of got to a point where it was either a secret that I needed to let go of, or the grave was going to be a lot closer than it should be, right? So I was having a hard time having both of those exist.
Yeah, to me, it sounds that extraordinary courage and strength that both of you found, and to be unapologetically who you are, and that's incredible. How did your family and community react when you broke the news?
Yeah, luckily for me, my family was really great, and I think they saw it coming, and they probably saw a lot more than I did. I was thinking I was being just so secretive, and no one would know that I was gay. But luckily they were all really good. I have family members who are still members of the church, and they they say that they don't accept the way that I live. They don't accept my lifestyle, but they accept me, which is very like, yeah, very hard. That's a very interesting and hard kind of conversation to have. One that I don't think anybody should have, but kind of the way that this organization, this religion is just that's what you do as a member. You accept the sinner, but
Not sin.
but not the sin, is how they say it.
Yeah.
So
It's almost like saying like meeting an accountant or something and being like, I love you, but I don't know if I can handle your career choice. It's like, I don't know, it doesn't make sense.
yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah,
So it sounds kind of like it doesn't really feel genuine all
Yeah,
the
yeah. And I do want to say though, with my family, all of them were very genuine. It's kind of like programming that the church gives you. And so they will say these things. The ones that are pretty devout in the religion will say these kinds of things like, oh, we accept you, but not your lifestyle. That's just programming that, I mean, we were programmed with the same kind of thing to say when other people left the church, like we were programmed to like go after them and not, I mean, just like go after them as in bringing them back to the church, like helping them remember their testimony and remember the truthfulness of the church. Like we're we're programmed pretty well. So
Yeah, you're told like that only true happiness can be found in the church. And so you're told that, you know, people who leave aren't truly happy, even though they might appear that way, they aren't. And that you need to, you know, it's your responsibility to go help your brothers and sisters, you know, find that true happiness. Yeah, so, but my family, so Lindsay was really lucky that her family was pretty accepting. My family, um, is accepting now. I'll say that. My brother's also gay and he came out I was like 14 I think when he came out. And that was honestly like pretty traumatic. That was like 2010 and wasn't a great time for anyone in my family. Talking about it now, my parents would, you know, they say like we did everything wrong with my brother when he came out. And I don't know how he is. He's so awesome. He's this, you know, really kind person. He is this lawyer in San Francisco. He's doing really well. And, you know, like he has just turned out so well. And I'm like, how did you do that with that so much trauma when you were 18? So poor guy. But so I was really scared to come out. There's kind of two sides. I thought maybe they would be accepting because of my brother, but I also was like, I saw how it went with my brother, so I'm nervous that it's going to be similar with me. And it ended up it was fine. There was a lot of conversations that were hard and hurtful, and I'd say probably about a year of just like heartbreak after heartbreak with my family. Just the conversations that we have are hard to hear. But I think we're at a good place now. I went from, you know, my family not wanting to ever hear me talk about anyone that I'm dating, not wanting to meet anyone I'm dating, like none of that, to us going on trips with my parents and things like that. So it's been, yeah, it's been a really good um, transition. They've, my parents have put in a ton of work and they've really come around, which is really awesome.
Ah, wow, that is so amazing. And I think with all of our choices when we come to our parents with some big decisions that go against what we were raised with or what our parents believe, I think it always comes down to, do I kind of sacrifice myself, or I really be, again, unapologetically myself and trying to explain and be, I am who I am.
yeah.
Oh, wow. And did you guys experience any inner conflicts during your transition or doubts? Because as we know, like going through a big change was like, first, yes, I want to do this, but there are some setbacks and there are some doubts creeping up. Did you experience any of that? And if so, how did you deal with them to keep going?
For sure is the answer for me. I'm a continual learner. So if I had those doubts, then I would just like study and study and study, you know. And it's funny because in in the religion, they tell you to continually study if you have doubts, you know, but don't look outside of the Book of Mormon and the Bible. Like that's a big no-no. And so anyway, so when I was doubting those things, then obviously, I mean, we have Google, so I would go online and research and just continually research, kind of to the point where it became kind of unhealthy because I was just finding out all of these lies and all of these things that just were really, I believed wholeheartedly in, you know? But yeah, just when I was doubting, like, that's what I did. I just turned to the books and turned to the computer and just found the answers. So
Yeah, I think for me, I think I have a unique like experience with that and with leaving um the religion. Because by the time I did actually leave, I was like pretty firm in that decision, and I didn't experience very many doubts at that point. But I will say that like when I was on my mission, um, I remember being in my first area. So you move areas like every could be every 6 weeks, could be every 12 weeks. So just depends. So I was in my first area. I was fresh out there. I was just learning everything, and um, I just remember like learning. They have this book called Preach My Gospel, and it's basically just like the textbook to being a good missionary. And like it teaches you how to teach, it teaches you what to teach, when to teach it, what to say, everything. And I was like learning the structure that they wanted us to teach it in, and it's not like a unique structure. And I just like saw kind of through that. I remember in that first area being like, I could take anything, and if I presented it this way with this structure, people would buy in. Like no matter what, like I could take any idea, and if I just presented it this way, eventually, because missionaries are very persistent, eventually people are going to buy in. And so I remember having that thought, and I was like, oh, don't have that thought. You still have a year and a half left out here. Like, save that for later. So I remember kind of pushing that in the back and just being like, all right, just do what my parents wanted to do and what I thought I wanted to do at that time. And I am grateful for it. And it's really like made me who I am. But I did have to kind of push that off. And so I think that grew so much so that by the time I did leave, I didn't have any like doubts. I haven't really looked back, especially because for me, it was so miserable being in the church, and like it was so miserable um, holding my membership in the church and my attraction for women in the same body. It was like unbearable for me. And so, yeah, that's something that I just know that I can't do. Um, and so, yeah, I don't know. For me, I don't feel like I really have had any doubts after leaving, just because I just remember how terrible it was for me internally being in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, yeah, this inner conflict. And in my work as a coach, I encounter and try not to be heartbroken about it, where people saying, I won't change. But then when push comes to shove and the work has to be done, I was like, oh no, or like I have those doubts, I'm not going to like push through them. So it's basically saying I'm choosing someone else deciding for me than me taking my power back and choosing me. And I really see that courage again, like that strength, enormous amount of it. So and it sounds like for both of you, like Lindsay, you kind of like decided and then you went and then you encountered that, and Dallas for you it's kind of like leading up to it. So it's incredible that it's like you came to this place from different perspectives. And like if you would give an advice to your younger selves that you discovered that you were sinful in the eyes of the religion, and like did you ever feel like you would have done it earlier, like came out earlier or decided to switch their religions earlier if you knew something like that secret ingredient? What would that be? That was it for part one of our conversation. To be continued, stay tuned for part two. Thank you for joining us on Navigating the Aftermath. Remember, no matter how challenging the journey may seem, you are not alone. Subscribe for more empowering stories, practical wisdom to help you navigate life's twists and turns. Until next time, keep moving forward with courage and conviction.